Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Despite being at war since 2022, Russian gas continued flowing through Ukraine to the EU until now. Starting January 1st, that historic transit route was shut down, marking the end of Russia's oldest gas pipeline to Europe. And now, just 2 weeks into the new year, the Kremlin is accusing Kiev of targeting the TurkStream, the last remaining pipeline delivering Russian gas to the EU. Moscow claims it intercepted 9 Ukrainian drones in southern Russia, describing the alleged attacks as energy terrorism. It's also revived accusations against Kiev for sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline, which was disabled in 2022, a charge Ukraine has consistently denied. On the recently terminated pipeline deal, Ukrainian officials stated their intent to deny Russia billions in profits. Amid these shifts, Turkey's energy minister Alparslan Bayraktar reaffirmed Ankara's commitment to strengthening Europe's energy security. He outlined plans to expand gas exports to Central and Eastern Europe through a Balkan pipeline and suggested revisiting the Qatar-Türkiye pipeline project, a proposal contingent on achieving stability in Syria and the broader region. For more, joining me now from Berlin is Thomas O'Donnell. He's a global fellow at the Wilson Center. From Monterey, California, Brenda Schaefer. She's an energy analyst at the Naval Postgraduate School. And from Lahore, Pakistan, Osama Rizvi. He's an energy and economy analyst at Prime Vision. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me now. I want to begin with Syria just because there's been a very big change there. Assad ousted after decades, a new government in Damascus. Thomas, what does this mean for the regional energy architecture going forward?
Well, thank you for having me again. Well, the easy answer is to first order nothing. But people have a lot of hopes and things they would like to do. For example, Turkey, where you're sitting, would very much like to have a pipeline from Qatar that would involve Syria. And this would add to the hopes of Turkey developing a multifaceted gas hub with gas coming from lots of places and shipping it on to Europe, but also having plenty for Turkey itself. And I know there's a lot of interest in this from Turkey's side, and this would be in the interest of Syria too. But I would say the problem is at the origins with Qatar. I would be skeptical that Qatar would go along with this. It's contradictory to their basic strategy, their basic approach, which is to, as a very small country, to rely on LNG that can be sold everywhere and not be tied to pipelines. But we shall see going forward what Turkey might offer them.
Mm-hmm. Brenda, you're in the U.S., January 20th, Trump coming in. When we look at Syria, the country is now liberated from Assad, but it's still not unified. Syria's oil is in the east, an area controlled by Syrian Democratic Forces, also a U.S. influence there. Obviously, the government in Damascus wants to see that oil back under its control. How do you see that going forward regarding Syria's oil? Do you foresee Trump giving it back to Damascus, keeping the oil, or having the SDF continue with its administration?
Well, with the entrance of the Trump administration to the White House, it's huge opportunities for Turkey and for improvement of Turkish-U.S. relations. One, Trump is very keen on ending or at least the Ukraine-Russia war. And obviously, Turkey is going to be an important power in the post-war security arrangement. And at the same time, also with Syria, Trump has been wanting to withdraw the U.S. forces from Syria as well. So I think this is in line also with Turkish interests in Syria. And it might not happen within a week or 2 weeks, but clearly it'll be part of the plan of the Trump administration. So this also gives an opportunity for Turkey and the United States to be on the same page instead of where they've been for over a decade, which is essentially with a conflict over the U.S. aligning itself with a terrorist organization inside Syria, versus working with its ally in NATO, Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Osama, when we look at many of the Syrian cities, they have electricity for a couple hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Energy infrastructure really bad right now. at least as a stopgap until this energy infrastructure is rebuilt, who can help out? What type of initiatives or measures could be taken to at least alleviate these huge energy deficiencies?
Well, it's good to be back on the show. I believe that Turkey right now is uniquely positioned. If you look at the infrastructure there, 5 LNG terminals, 3 floating storage units, 7, 8, 9 pipelines. There has been a 70% increase in public investment fund for energy projects. Around 7% of the GDP went to such projects. So, and then we also have the Trans-Anatolian gas pipeline and the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. And Turkey is playing an important role in all of these. So I think Turkey is uniquely positioned to help Syria out. However, on the other end, on the challenges and the hurdles, as I said recently, that the territorial integrity of Syria, along with a unanimous, plan to move forward amongst all the various factions in the country, that remains. I mean, the political economy challenges remain a very important issue for the development of any kind of provision of electricity or the revival of the Qatar-Türkiye gas pipeline. So it's easier said than done, but Turkey definitely is uniquely positioned to do so.
Okay. Thomas, I want to go to another conflict that's impacting the energy architecture of the region and also energy markets. Obviously, war in Ukraine has had a huge impact. As of January 1st, Russian gas transiting through Ukraine has stopped. That's definitely going to have an impact, especially on Eastern Europe. Weather is getting cold. How do you see this impact reverberating through the markets, impacting Europe?
Well, generally, it should not have had much of any impact. This is something everybody knew about for a long time. It was a 5-year contract. The Ukrainians made it clear they weren't going to renegotiate another contract. I really have to say, we should thank the Ukrainians in a way. They've gone the extra mile, to say the least, to continue reliably transiting Russian gas across their country while they're at war with Russia was pretty incredible. But they gave the countries, especially of their neighbors in Central and Eastern Europe, they gave them 3 years to prepare for this. And there's no reason anybody should not be prepared. Yes, you might pay more money because you're going to get more LNG rather than pipeline gas and this kind of thing. But there's no reason. Now, certain countries like, Mr. Fico in Slovakia, and to some extent also Mr. Orban, have really complained about this. But nothing's happening to them that hasn't happened due to the Russian energy war on Europe that's happened to everybody. Everybody's paying about twice as much as they paid before the war, but that's because Russia cut off the gas in Nord Stream. Russia cut off spot sales of gas before that in order to undermine the solidarity of Europe in support of Ukraine, and that didn't work. And they lost the business. Gazprom has lost money this year, almost 7 billion euros they've lost. It's incredible. And so this shouldn't make a big difference. Now, I would add something unexpected happened. The Europeans have some problems with their energy policies always. They had plenty of extra gas in storage, very high level of extra gas, and it was completely eaten up, that extra gas in storage in November and early December because of something the Germans, I'm in Germany here, they call it Dunkelflaute. There was no wind, there was no solar, and it was very cold, and they had to burn natural gas because of what I would say an overdependence, an unrealistic dependence on windmills and solar. Now they used that up, and now they have to scramble for gas for next year, and they're going to go to the international market and try and draw gas LNG away from Asia, especially during cooling season. It's going to be hard. And now, for example, Bloomberg yesterday, their analysts are worrying about the EU is going to cause a certain scramble and high prices globally in gas, and that's possible. So normally this cut of gas shouldn't have much effect, but because of I would say, a weakness, a systemic weakness in the way the Europeans guarantee their security, they're in some trouble. And if anything else happened to their supply in Europe, they're going to be even more, a little bit more panicked. They have enough gas to get through the winter. This is a matter of prices and competitiveness and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Brenda, obviously with Ukraine cutting off transit and Nord Stream pipeline offline off the coast of Germany, Right now, it seems that the major pipeline or the major avenue where Russian gas could move westward has become TurkStream. How important is that pipeline to Turkey's energy security, to Eastern Europe's energy security, and what type of leverage does it give the Turks geopolitically over the Russians?
Right. So, with the end of the Ukraine transit, so Turkey, as well as a gas transit state, has become even more important, and also potential not only of Russian gas but of additional Azerbaijani gas, potential Turkmen gas via the Southern Gas Corridor into Europe. The real problem with Europe, any type of expansions, compressors, production of more gas that could alleviate what Tom has called a systemic energy security problem, which I agree with, is the main impediment to European gas imports is not Russia, it's not Ukraine, it's not the United States, it's Europe itself. So Europe, because it's still under the illusion that somehow it is in an energy transition, that it can rely on wind and solar, that it could put on an extra sweater and somehow that will help its energy security. They're not setting conditions to import more gas. So whether that's long-term gas contracts, so if you're a gas producer in Azerbaijan or in Turkmenistan, you can invest and produce that gas, or they're not giving public finance that also could alleviate some of that risk. So could be with the entrance of Trump to the White House and a completely different energy policy towards energy. Also different elections in European countries, in the European Parliament. The main question is, when is Europe going to get real about its energy security? And I would even claim that not only do most NATO members not pay their required amount of percentage of GNP into their defense budget, but also not protecting themselves energy-wise, that this is another strategic vulnerability. And it's something that I don't think the United States under Trump is going to have a lot of tolerance for, these countries to continue to have, be on the edge of blackouts, pricing themselves out of manufacturing because of expensive and unreliable electricity, and essentially, having this national security vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely the security of pipelines is very important, which is great to lead into the question I'm going to ask Osama. There's reports yesterday that the TurkStream pipeline, the compressor station on the Russian side, was under a Ukrainian drone attack. It was fought off, no real damage. This is the Russian foreign minister talked about it. Also, the Hungarian foreign minister chimed in about the attack as well. Haven't seen an official statement from the Turkish side yet, but Osama, have these types of pipelines become legitimate targets? And how important is this energy infrastructure security? How should the Turks be looking at an attack like this?
Well, that is a very interesting question. But first, I would just like to build upon Thomas and Brenda's really brilliant points. And when it comes to Europe and its energy dependence on Russian gas, we need to take a look at the wider picture. Interestingly, in the previous few years, Europe's main source of gas is now from the US, as 47% of its gas imports last year came from US versus 12% from Russia and 13% from Qatar. So that's a very interesting dynamic that we need to look at and account for while discussing the future of the Ukrainian transit route. To return to your question, I believe that we are living in a highly charged geopolitical era. This is not the first time that we have seen strikes on energy infrastructure. It has happened in other parts of the world as well, in Middle East, as recent as last year as well, which has caused price swings. So no, it's not a legitimate target, but any actors, any non-state or state actors can use it to their advantage in what is, I say it again, in a highly charged geopolitical era, which can in turn impact the sentiment, the pricing, and as the world right now is recovering from a really prolonged economic crisis, be it the developed countries or the developing countries, such instances can cause swings that might have long-lasting impacts on countries such as like Pakistan or others who import gas for their electricity. In terms of Turkey, TurkStream carries a huge importance, but we have to look at once again at the bigger picture. I don't see that TurkStream will just replace Ukrainian transit route all of a sudden, but it might have the potential along with coupled with the Qatar-Türkiye pipeline. But all of it is easier said than done. It will require a lot of diplomatic navigation. A lot of other players are involved in this, and only time can tell.
Thomas, what does January 20th mean for energy markets, especially for regional energy markets, Middle East, Eastern Europe? Will Trump be positive?
Well, we could ask Mr. Trump. On the one hand, he seems fairly erratic, but on the other hand, if you look at the people he's appointed and their points of view, the picture starts coming together. If I could just expand just a bit on what Osama said and what you asked him about the supposed Ukrainian attack on a pumping station in Krasnoyar, Russia, where the South Stream, the last Russian pipeline to Europe, goes into the Black Sea, goes to the European part of Turkey and up into Europe, and mainly serves countries where the leadership is sympathetic to Putin. Now, supposedly the Ukrainians attacked this yesterday and it was unsuccessful with drones. Now, they claimed in 2022 that the Ukrainians did this with saboteurs. That was before there were drones, and it seems to have been fallacious. What I'm told by Ukrainians, there's no official statement yet, but it's a bit suspicious to me that right nearby there's a significant Russian radar installation. The attack might have been against that. And in any case, what's also interesting, at the same time, Lavrov just had a press conference where he said the American administration has decided to launch a major sabotage campaign against all this infrastructure. Well, I think it's quite interesting. Somebody cut the pipeline in the Caspian that BP, British Petroleum, operates at Shah Deniz that goes into the Southern Corridor. And the gas has been cut going through this pipeline, which is a pipeline the United States has always supported and helped build, really pushed to build. There's no reason the United States would attack that. So usually when the Russians make these kind of statements, there's a big sabotage campaign coming by the Americans. The only lie involved usually is the word American. It should be Russian. And is it the Americans that are cutting the pipelines and are cutting communications, fiber optics and so forth in the Black Sea? I'm sorry, in the Baltic Sea, in the North Sea? There's been 3 or 4 now cut, and every time it's a Chinese vessel leaving a Russian port. This might be, we can't say for sure, but putting the pieces together, it might be that Russia has engaged in a sabotage campaign. Now that it has essentially no gas business left in Europe, maybe it wants Europe to suffer. And as my colleagues here have said, Putin understands that they're in a difficult situation because of their internal policies. They're vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely an interesting era we've entered where these types of civilian infrastructure have at least become high priority targets, if not legitimate targets. Brenda, Turkey being an energy hub, we've heard this branding a lot, but generally when we hear it, it's the Turks and the Russians talking. With Trump coming into office, could we see more Turkish-US cooperation on energy where the US is also part of Turkey being an energy hub? What comes to mind? Maybe LNG storage in Eastern Thracian area using Turkish pipelines going forward. Obviously more US LNG being used, or obviously refining, joint refining. Many things come to mind, but are any of these discussed?
Yeah, so definitely, from October 2021, the Biden administration gave an order to all U.S. embassies, all U.S. agencies, not even to discuss, let alone to fund fossil fuel projects or policies with the U.S. partners and allies abroad. So fossil fuels didn't exist in terms of the Biden administration, and it wasn't part of the dialogue in foreign policy. So and the U.S. under Biden didn't promote the energy security of its allies. Projects like the Southern Gas Corridor, which was as Thomas pointed out, also was championed by various United States administrations. Even though it basically served the energy security of Europe, it didn't have a direct impact on the United States. Obviously, under Trump, this is going to change completely, and energy that's in use today, including fossil fuels, will be back front and center as part of the foreign policy agenda and the dialogue. And therefore, this is another issue which will raise Turkey's profile in the United States. I think the fact that Turkey has concluded long-term LNG import contracts, also with American companies, I think this is something that Trump will find favorably. And even to talk differently about gas production, or oil and gas production in Syria, and potential export. So, Syria prior to for decades was an oil exporter, and its gas production was growing. It was self-sufficient prior to the breakout of the Civil War. The Civil War actually happened almost in a textbook way, just as Syria's production was declining in oil and its consumption was rising, and the regime lost its oil export. It could no longer, pay the security services in the same way, subsidize the public. This is when the regime in Syria lost control and the civil war broke out. But there are, there's been some things that they might sound almost comical, but actually got very close to fruition because, so there's rhetoric on one side and ideology on the other side. But for instance, under the Biden administration, his energy coordinator, Amos Hochstein, he negotiated a deal, almost took place, where Egypt would export gas to Syria and to Lebanon, and at the same time, Egypt would import more gas from Israel. So if you understand a bit of geography, basically Egypt was going to be exporting Israeli gas to Syria and Lebanon, and everyone agreed to this, even though they knew about it, that it was essentially Israeli molecules going to Syria and Lebanon. I think that for Syria to rebuild itself, for Lebanon to have any chance of stability and economic prosperity, as El Shara said, that they have to get 8 hours of power into Syria a day within 2 months. I think it's essential that flows of electricity and gas start in the region. And I wouldn't be surprised if Egyptian gas that comes from Israel and initially flows into Syria and to Lebanon and helps to stabilize these countries.
Mm-hmm. Osama, Central Asia, very important geography, especially from an energy perspective. We're seeing more and more infrastructure developed and cultivated in that region. What type of role do you expect it to play in the coming years, especially vis-a-vis Europe?
Well, we already have the Southern Gas Corridor and Azeri gas making a way there. In terms of the Central Asian region, I have said this in my other articles as well, that we need to look at it from the perspective of as an energy hub. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, all the other stand countries moving forward next decade, 5 years, they stand to play an utterly important role when it comes to the global energy security. Pakistan, Turkey, all of the other countries I've seen, I can speak about Pakistan as well. Like, we have developed a lot of new contracts, a lot of visits. We hosted the Shanghai Cooperation Organization here as well. And similarly, Turkey can be seen extending its relation with these countries. It serves, but we need to look at the other point as well, always, in terms of the energy security, how long it manages to insulate itself from the regional dynamics. I think the U.S. Department's Geological Survey categorizing Central Asia also as one of the strategic regions because of the rare earths might draw Central Asia into some sort of the great power game. But as long as it stays as it is right now, I think it can play a positive role in terms of provision and supply of energy, which can definitely decentralize the global supply chains that seems to be choking at the moment.
Brenda, Osama, Thomas, thanks for that conversation. It was a very energetic chat. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.